I have rights to access this lake.
That's what HOA President Karen Whitfield screamed at my private lake gate when I refused to give her the access code. See, my property came with exclusive gate access to the community boat launch. Karen decided that somehow my private gate should be community property because she's the HOA president. She'd been demanding my gate code for weeks, claiming board oversight of all lake access. When I politely declined, she showed up during my family barbecue, pounding on the gate like a maniac. I'm trying to grill burgers with my 8-year-old grandson when this clipboard warrior starts having a full meltdown at my fence, screaming about her rights to control my property. The sound of metal rattling as she shakes the gate. My grandson asking, "Grandpa, why can't she just use her own gate?" So I pulled out my phone and called the sheriff. What happened next would cost Karen everything she thought she owned. What would you have done? Tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? I'm Garrison Webb, and let me paint you the picture of how this nightmare started. 20 years in the Navy as a civil engineer, crawling through ship hulls and designing harbor fortifications from San Diego to Norfolk. Every paycheck, every deployment bonus, every penny I could scrape together went into one dream, lakefront retirement where I could finally hear something other than diesel engines and barking sergeants. Lake Hartwell sits right on the Georgia-South Carolina border, and after months of searching, I found it. 3 acres of paradise for $280,000, my entire life savings. But here's the kicker. The property came with something special. A private gate providing exclusive access to the community boat launch and dock area. Not shared access, not community access, private. My realtor made sure I understood this was the crown jewel of the property. Picture this. Every morning, I'd walk down to that gate with my coffee, the smell of pine sap heavy in the morning air, keys jingling against the cool metal as I unlocked my personal slice of lake paradise. The weathered wood dock creaked under my feet, and I could taste the clean lake breeze mixing with the aroma of my wife's coffee drifting from the kitchen window. My wife Dolores, a school librarian with the patience of a saint, would join me for sunset walks down to the water. Our grandson Trey spends every summer with us, and teaching him to fish through that private gate was supposed to be our legacy moment. Generational wealth for a guy who grew up in a trailer park. Then we met Karen Whitfield, and suddenly I understood why some people join HOAs just to torture their neighbors. It's like giving a hall monitor nuclear weapons. 58 years old, real estate agent, BMW SUV driver, and HOA Lakeside Preserve Board president for 6 long years. Moved down from California with a mission to improve community standards, which apparently meant turning a peaceful lake community into her personal fiefdom. 2 weeks after we moved in, there's Karen at my front door with her ever-present clipboard and the kind of smile that makes you check your wallet. "Mr. Webb, I need the access code to your lake gate." I'm thinking this is some kind of welcome committee thing. "I'm sorry, what for?" "Board oversight. We need access to all lake entry points for community management." She said it like she was running the Pentagon instead of a suburban fishing community. I've read contracts before. Naval procurement teaches you to spot BS from a nautical mile away. "Ma'am, according to my deed, that's a private easement. The gate's on my property." The sound of her designer heels clicking on my dock as she circles the gate perimeter, measuring distances with her iPhone app like she's planning a military operation. The smell of her overpowering perfume mixing with the natural lake air, like someone sprayed Chanel No. 5 on a pine tree. "Mr. Webb, I think you misunderstand how HOAs work. The board has certain authorities." I pulled out my property deed, showed her the black and white language about exclusive access rights. Karen glanced at it like I'd handed her a napkin with crayon scribbles. These older documents sometimes conflict with current community standards. That's when I learned my first lesson about HOA tyrants. They treat legal documents like suggestions and personal opinions like federal law. Over the next week, I discovered the community dynamics. Every other homeowner in Lakeside Preserve accesses the lake through a public area on the opposite side. My private gate exists because my lot was part of the original development, specifically designed with exclusive access as a premium feature. Other neighbors seemed afraid to even mention Karen's name above a whisper. "Mr. Webb, the board has voted to implement a $200 monthly maintenance fee for private lake access points. $200. For a gate I maintain on my property, providing access I already owned." The taste of diesel exhaust became my daily alarm clock as Karen would idle her BMW outside my gate, making phone calls while staring at my property like she was casing it for a heist. When I refused both the access code and the fee, Karen's voice dropped to that special tone reserved for people who peaked in high school. "Mr. Webb, there are alternative enforcement methods available to the board." Karen's alternative enforcement methods revealed themselves 3 days later when I got a certified letter from County Code Enforcement. Apparently, my dock, the same dock that had been sitting peacefully in the water since 1998, was now a potential safety violation that required immediate inspection. Here's the beautiful thing about spite. It makes people sloppy. Karen was so focused on punishing me for the gate access denial that she pivoted to attacking my dock without thinking it through. Classic military mistake, opening a second front when you haven't won the first battle. The code enforcement officer showed up on a Saturday morning during my grandson's birthday party. Picture 12 8-year-olds running around with cake frosting on their faces while this poor guy in a county uniform has to measure dock setbacks because some HOA president filed a complaint out of pure pettiness. The smell of chocolate birthday cake mixing with the officer's cigarette breath as he apologized for the timing. "Sir, I gotta do my job, but this seems like..." He gestured helplessly at the kids playing on a dock that was obviously older than most of the parents at the party. The sound of measuring tape clicking against dock posts while children's laughter echoed across the water felt like watching someone audit a playground. 20 minutes later, 0 violations found. The dock predates current setback requirements and is grandfathered under existing codes. But the damage was done. Other parents started giving me those sideways looks like I was the neighborhood troublemaker bringing government inspectors to a kid's birthday party. That night, I did what any retired military engineer does when someone declares war. I went to the courthouse and started researching. Back in the Navy, we had a saying, "Know your enemy's supply lines." In this case, Karen's supply line was legal documentation, and I was about to cut it off. The musty basement smell of county records mixed with fluorescent lights buzzing overhead like angry wasps. My fingers cramped from photocopying decades of documents, but years of reading naval contracts had taught me something crucial about legal loopholes. They usually exist because someone didn't read the original fine print. And there it was, the original 1987 Lakeside Preserve Covenant explicitly stating that existing water access structures and private easements shall be protected and maintained in perpetuity. My dock was built in 1998, 11 years after those protections were established. Karen's legal attack violated the foundational document that created her precious HOA in the first place. Time for my first counterattack. I sent every homeowner in the community a PDF of the original covenant, highlighting the protection clause that Karen had conveniently forgotten about. Professional, factual, no drama, just the law in black and white. Sometimes the best revenge is simply telling the truth. Karen's response came within hours, an emergency board meeting to discuss misinterpretation of outdated covenant language. She claimed that 2015 amendments had superseded the original protections, requiring all structures to meet current standards. Here's where Karen made her second mistake. She scheduled this emergency meeting for 7 p.m. on a Tuesday, giving exactly 48 hours notice as required by state law, but she didn't count on 3 elderly neighbors approaching me privately after receiving my covenant email. "Garrison, we remember that 2015 meeting," said Mrs. Patterson, an 82-year-old retired teacher who'd lived in the community since it opened. The taste of her homemade lemonade mixed with the satisfaction of incoming intelligence. Hurricane Matthew was coming through. Most folks had evacuated or were boarding up windows. Only 4 people showed up. My naval training kicked in. I remembered reading about HOA law during our house hunt. In Georgia, covenant amendments require a quorum of 60% of homeowners to be legally binding. 4 people voting to change rules for 47 families is like your mailman deciding to renovate your kitchen. Impressive audacity, 0 legal authority. I formally challenged the 2015 amendments, demanding a new vote with proper notice and quorum. Karen's response escalated to a level of petty that would make middle school principals proud. Daily property inspections became her new hobby. Every morning, Karen would drive slowly past my house, park on the public street, and photograph my gate and dock from every conceivable angle. She'd measure my grass height with a ruler, actually crouch down on the sidewalk with a ruler like she was investigating a crime scene. The woman documented the angle of my mailbox, took notes about my garbage can placement, and studied my property like she was planning an invasion. The sound of her BMW idling outside during dinner became our family's least favorite background music. The acrid smell of exhaust would drift through our kitchen window while we tried to eat. My grandson would peek through the curtains and ask, "Grandpa, why does that lady keep taking pictures of our house?" But here's what Karen didn't see coming. Her harassment campaign was creating exactly the opposite effect she wanted. Instead of isolating me, her daily stalking routine was making neighbors uncomfortable enough to start approaching me with their own Karen horror stories. She made us tear out our rose garden because the height violated sightline requirements, one couple whispered during a chance encounter at the grocery store. Cost us $3,000 to replant with her approved shrubs. She forced the Hendersons to move when they couldn't afford her pool depth corrections, another neighbor revealed while walking her dog past my gate. $30,000 in legal fees before they gave up and sold. That's when I realized this woman hadn't just declared war on me. She'd been systematically terrorizing an entire community for years. The difference was, I'd spent 2 decades dealing with people who had real authority, not clipboard dictators drunk on imaginary power. Karen's next move proved she'd learned nothing from our first skirmish. Instead of backing down, she doubled down with the legal equivalent of a nuclear option, a full lawsuit claiming my dock created a navigation hazard and my gate created exclusionary community access. $25,000 in legal fees, plus removal of both the gate lock and the dock. 2 fronts. She was now attacking both my gate rights and my dock rights simultaneously, like some suburban general who'd read half a military strategy book and decided to invade Russia in winter. The lawsuit papers arrived via process server while I was teaching my grandson to cast a fishing line. Because Karen has impeccable timing for maximum family disruption. The sound of legal documents rustling in the lake breeze while an 8-year-old asks, "Grandpa, what's that scary man want?" is a special kind of surreal. The smell of fresh lake air mixing with the musty odor of legal paper felt like someone had contaminated paradise with bureaucracy. This forced me to hire an attorney at $300 an hour. Meanwhile, Karen's husband's law firm buddy was representing the HOA pro bono, which I later discovered meant billing the HOA at $500 an hour while calling it free legal services. It's like getting a free car that costs twice as much because someone else is paying. The discovery process became Karen's new torture method. Her attorney demanded 20 years of documentation, every receipt, permit application, bank statement, and probably my grandson's finger paintings related to the property. I spent weekends organizing boxes of paperwork like I was preparing for a military tribunal over a fishing dock. The taste of document dust mixed with frustration became my weekend flavor profile. But Karen wasn't content with legal warfare. She launched a community smear campaign that would make political operatives jealous. Suddenly, I was the unstable veteran who hoards lake access and threatens neighbors with his military background. The woman had transformed my Navy service, something I was proud of, into a weapon against my own character. The smell of paranoia started permeating neighborhood interactions. People who used to wave from their driveways now avoided eye contact like I was carrying a contagious disease. Karen had poisoned the community well, and I was the designated villain in her suburban drama. That's when I decided to do some reconnaissance of my own. 20 years of security clearances teaches you how to research people properly, and I used those skills to dig into Karen's background. My old Navy buddy runs background checks for a security company, and what we found over beers and barbecue made my legal problems seem like parking tickets. Karen Whitfield had fled California after HOA embezzlement allegations. The previous community had filed complaints claiming she approved $80,000 in emergency repairs to properties owned by relatives, never disclosing the conflicts of interest. The pattern was textbook: authorize overpriced work, collect kickbacks, move to a new community before the investigation concluded. But here's where it got interesting locally. I started tracking Karen's husband's construction contracts with our current HOA. $300,000 in work over 3 years, all no-bid contracts. The invoices showed prices 40% above market rates for basic maintenance like driveway sealing and fence repairs. I cross-referenced these with actual market prices, and the numbers told a story that would make auditors weep. I began documenting everything with the methodical precision that military training drills into you. Security cameras went up around my property. Georgia is a one-party consent state, so I could legally record any interaction. Every conversation with Karen, every trespass incident, every harassment episode was now creating a permanent record. The cameras caught their first gold within a week. Karen trespassing on my property at midnight, measuring both my gate mechanism and dock pilings with a flashlight and tape measure. The infrared footage showed her creeping around like a bargain bin cat burglar, taking notes and photographs of my unauthorized structures in the middle of the night. The crunch of gravel under her feet was clearly audible as she skulked around my dock like some kind of suburban spy. My attorney explained that trespassing evidence could flip the entire lawsuit dynamic. Instead of playing defense against Karen's attacks, we now had grounds for a restraining order and countercharges. Sometimes the best military strategy is letting your enemy overextend themselves until they're vulnerable, and Karen was about to learn that lesson the hard way. Karen's community pressure campaign intensified as her legal position weakened. She organized a petition demanding I share lake access for community harmony, essentially asking neighbors to vote away my property rights because she couldn't steal them legally. But here's the twist Karen didn't see coming. Her harassment had created exactly the opposite effect she wanted. 2 homeowners not only refused to sign her petition but privately approached me with explosive information. She made us replace our perfectly good driveway last year, one couple revealed. $15,000 for community standards compliance. Her husband's company did the work at twice the quoted price, and when we questioned it, she threatened to fine us for non-compliance. When I requested HOA financial records, which state law guarantees as my homeowner right, Karen demanded a $500 administrative fee. This woman was so used to being a small-town dictator that she'd forgotten homeowners have actual legal rights. And charging fees to access financial records is a misdemeanor offense that automatically triggers board removal procedures. Karen had just handed me the keys to her own destruction. Karen's desperation reached new heights when she proposed a special assessment that would make even the most patient homeowner consider arson. $2,000 per year, per household, to hire a private security company that would monitor all lake access points and enforce water usage regulations. Translation, she wanted every family to pay for armed guards to control my private gate because she couldn't steal the access code legally. The woman was essentially proposing to tax the entire community for her personal vendetta. It's like your neighbor demanding everyone chip in for a tank because you won't let them borrow your lawnmower. The financial hostage situation was brilliant in its evil simplicity. Vote against the security assessment and Karen would paint you as anti-safety. Vote for it, and you're funding her private army to harass the guy with the fishing dock. The smell of coercion hung over the community like diesel exhaust on a hot summer day. But Karen's intimidation campaign was expanding beyond financial warfare. Her allies, and yes, she had developed a small cult of clipboard followers, started parking near my driveway during school pickup times, making my wife Dolores uncomfortable driving past their little surveillance party. The sound of car doors slamming and hushed conversations every afternoon at 3:15 p.m. became our new normal, like living next to a very boring spy operation. The psychological pressure escalated when Karen filed a police report claiming I stalked her at the grocery store. The incident: we happened to shop on the same Saturday morning, and I had the audacity to exist in the produce section while she was buying organic kale. The officer who came to investigate this crime against humanity looked embarrassed to even be there. "Sir, I gotta follow up on all reports, but..." He gestured helplessly at his notepad. "She claims you followed her from the lettuce to the tomatoes with threatening intent." The taste of absurdity is bitter and metallic, like licking a penny while someone explains why grocery shopping is now considered stalking. That's when my research hit the mother lode. While digging through public records, a skill the Navy taught me for investigating contractors, I discovered that Karen doesn't actually live in our community full-time. She rents out her actual residence and uses her HOA property as a weekend retreat, which violates every bylaw about board member residency requirements. But here's where it gets truly insane. Property tax records showed Karen claims homestead exemption on a different address 20 miles away, which means she's been committing tax fraud while illegally serving on our HOA board. The irony was delicious. The woman obsessed with community standards had been lying about her own residency for years. I started tracking her weekly pattern with the dedication of a wildlife photographer. Every Sunday night, Karen's BMW would leave the community, returning Friday mornings like some kind of suburban migrant worker. My trail camera near the entrance captured time-stamped evidence of her departure routine, 47 consecutive weeks of the same pattern. The legal implications were staggering. I requested her expense reports using state transparency laws and found $12,000 in travel reimbursements for board duties over the past year. The travel expenses coincided perfectly with times she claimed to be working from home in our community. She was billing the HOA for trips to her actual residence while pretending to live here. Residency violations don't just void Karen's board authority, they potentially invalidate every vote, contract, and decision made during her tenure. 6 years of tyrannical rule could be wiped out because she couldn't resist double-dipping on housing expenses. I shared this evidence with 3 of the most affected neighbors, and the community awakening was like watching people emerge from a cult. We spent $8,000 on landscaping changes because she said our roses violated height restrictions, one family whispered. Her husband's company did the work, and now we know why. But then came the conversation that changed everything. Mrs. Patterson, the 82-year-old retired teacher, pulled me aside with tears streaming down her weathered cheeks. Garrison, she made me remove Harold's memorial garden because it violated landscaping standards. That garden represented 40 years of marriage. I planted those flowers over his ashes with my own hands. The smell of Mrs. Patterson's lavender perfume mixing with her tears as she described how Karen destroyed something sacred hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't about property values or community standards. It was about one person's pathological need to control others, even if it meant desecrating a war veteran's memorial. But here's the twist that made my blood run cold. Mrs. Patterson handed me a folder of documents. I kept everything, dear. Every letter, every threat, every fine, including this. Inside was a handwritten note from Karen to Mrs. Patterson. Remove the unauthorized plantings by Friday or face daily fines. Personal memorials are not community assets. This is your final warning before legal action. The note was dated 3 days after Harold Patterson's funeral. Karen had waited exactly 3 days after a war veteran's burial to threaten his widow about his memorial garden. That night I realized this fight had evolved far beyond my gate access or dock rights. Some battles are worth fighting not just for yourself, but for everyone who can't fight back. And sometimes evil is so pure that it demands complete destruction. The crunch of gravel under my boots as I walked to my gate at sunset reminded me that this war was about to enter its final phase. That folder from Mrs. Patterson became the Rosetta Stone that decoded 6 years of Karen's criminal empire. But it wasn't just the Heartless Memorial Garden letter that made my hands shake as I read it. Tucked inside were photocopies of original HOA documents that this retired teacher had meticulously preserved since the community's founding. The smell of old paper and fading ink filled my kitchen as I spread out documents that would change everything. The original developer's master plan from 1987 contained language that made my legal problems disappear like morning fog. Private easement gates and existing water access structures shall be protected and maintained in perpetuity as primary selling features of lakefront properties. My gate access and dock protection weren't just grandfathered in. They were the foundational selling points that created property values for the entire development. Every legal action Karen had taken violated the basic contract that established our HOA's existence. It's like suing someone for owning the house you sold them, then claiming you never intended to sell it in the first place. But Mrs. Patterson's archive revealed something that made the insurance investigator in me wake up and pay attention. She'd kept meticulous records of every HOA expense during Karen's tenure, cross-referencing invoices with actual work performed because something just seemed fishy about all those emergency repairs. The financial fraud wasn't just systematic, it was breathtakingly audacious. Karen's husband's company had received $300,000 in contracts over 3 years, but the pattern of overcharging was surgical in its precision. Driveway sealing quoted at market rate, then emergency complications would mysteriously double the price mid-project. Fence repairs estimated at $2,000, final bills arriving at $5,000 with material upgrades nobody had requested or approved. The taste of cold coffee mixed with hot rage as I realized every family in our community had been systematically robbed under the guise of property maintenance. But Mrs. Patterson had saved something that would turn this from civil fraud into criminal prosecution. I questioned these insurance claims because the timing seemed odd, she explained, her voice trembling as she pointed to 17 separate storm damage reports totaling $87,000. Harold always tracked the weather for his garden, so I knew when storms actually happened. The smoking gun was buried in those insurance documents. I cross-referenced Karen's claims with National Weather Service data and found something that made my military-trained analytical mind light up like a Christmas tree. 3 of the claimed storm damage incidents occurred during weeks with 0 precipitation and wind speeds under 10 miles per hour. Karen had literally fabricated weather disasters to commit insurance fraud. In Georgia, insurance fraud is a felony carrying 5 to 10 years in prison. Her signatures on false claims created liability for criminal prosecution, and her real estate license would be automatically revoked upon conviction. The residency fraud added another felony layer. Property tax records showed Karen claiming homestead exemption on her actual residence while simultaneously billing our HOA for housing expenses as a board member. She was double-dipping on tax benefits while committing residency fraud, crimes that could cost her both her career and her freedom. Mrs. Patterson sipped her tea with shaking hands. I just thought she was being mean to an old widow. I never realized she was stealing from everyone. The sound of her voice cracking with the weight of 6 years of documented abuse hit me harder than any military briefing I'd ever received. The irony was perfect in its cruel justice. Karen's aggressive lawsuit against my property had created the discovery process that exposed her entire criminal operation. Her desperation to steal my gate access had led her to trigger the investigation that would destroy everything she'd built. I now possessed evidence that would send Karen to prison and recover hundreds of thousands of stolen dollars for our community. But something about Mrs. Patterson's tears over her husband's desecrated memorial garden demanded more than quiet legal justice. This woman deserved to face the consequences of her crimes in front of everyone she'd terrorized. Some battles determine whether communities live in freedom or fear. The crunch of gravel under my feet as I walked to check my gate lock that night reminded me Karen had declared war on the wrong community. Military operations succeed through meticulous planning, and destroying Karen's criminal empire required the same methodical precision I'd used planning harbor defenses in the Navy. The difference was, this time I was planning an offensive that would liberate an entire community from 6 years of financial terrorism. My kitchen table became mission control, covered in evidence folders that smelled like courthouse basement and righteous anger. Each folder organized by crime category: residency fraud, insurance fraud, self-dealing contracts, harassment documentation, and tax violations. The sound of paper clips organizing justice became my evening soundtrack. The first alliance meeting happened in Mrs. Patterson's living room, surrounded by the smell of homemade chocolate chip cookies and the lingering lavender scent of her late husband's memorial flowers, the ones Karen had forced her to destroy. 5 affected neighbors gathered like refugees planning a resistance movement. "I never thought anyone would stand up to her," whispered Janet Morrison, whose family had been forced to replace their perfectly functional driveway. She made us feel like criminals for questioning a $15,000 bill. The taste of Janet's nervous coffee mixed with the sweetness of Mrs. Patterson's cookies created an oddly comforting war council atmosphere. Tom Bradley, the elderly man Karen had fined for his unauthorized bird feeder, pulled out a shoebox that looked like evidence from a serial killer investigation. 67 different infractions over 2 years. My bird feeder was apparently a wildlife attraction hazard that required professional removal. The man had been fined for feeding cardinals, which, in the grand scheme of HOA tyranny, somehow made perfect sense. My strategy was simple but comprehensive. Use the HOA's own rules to expose their systematic violation. I'd request a financial transparency review as a formal agenda item for the next monthly HOA meeting, where state law required all homeowners be invited and allowed to speak. Each ally received a specific assignment with the precision of a military briefing. Mrs. Patterson would speak about the memorial garden harassment, showing how Karen targeted grieving widows. The Morrisons would present their driveway overcharge documentation, demonstrating the financial fraud pattern. Tom would explain the arbitrary violation system that generated constant revenue through made-up infractions. But the technical setup required military-grade precision. I reserved the community center meeting room, installed my own recording equipment with proper legal notices, and prepared visual presentations that would make the evidence undeniable to every attendee. The smell of new electronics mixing with the musty community center air felt like preparing for the most important briefing of my career. The legal strategy built from small violations to serious crimes ending with financial recovery calculations showing each family exactly how much Karen had stolen. My attorney explained how to present evidence for maximum impact while maintaining courtroom admissibility for future criminal prosecutions, because Karen's crimes weren't just going away with public humiliation. I contacted Maria Santos, a local reporter who specialized in municipal corruption stories. Without revealing specific details, I ceded interest in HOA reform and homeowner rights over coffee that tasted like anticipation mixed with revenge. There's a story developing about systematic abuse in lakefront communities. Might be worth attending some HOA meetings. The documentation process consumed every evening for 2 weeks. I scanned evidence into searchable digital formats, created backup copies stored in cloud services, and organized presentation materials that could survive Karen's inevitable attempts to disrupt the meeting. The blue light from my scanner became as familiar as ship radar displays, another kind of navigation system guiding us toward justice. My relationship with Detective Ray Morrison at the Sheriff's White-Collar Crime Unit grew from casual consultation to active cooperation. This level of systematic fraud usually indicates organized criminal activity, he explained during our third meeting. We'll need pristine evidence for prosecution. Having a cop named Morrison investigate someone terrorizing the Morrison family felt like cosmic justice. The insurance company notification required surgical timing. I sent anonymous tips about potentially fraudulent claims, triggering their internal investigation without alerting Karen. Insurance companies investigate fraud with the enthusiasm of bloodhounds tracking bacon. Once they smell money being stolen, they don't stop until they find every penny. I filed complaints with the Georgia Real Estate Commission about Karen's license violations. The residency fraud and fiduciary violations created multiple pressure points that would activate automatically, regardless of our meeting outcome. The community newsletter became an unexpected weapon. My guest editorial about homeowner rights educated residents about financial transparency and board accountability without revealing our planned exposure. Knowledge is power, but surprise knowledge is devastation. But the most important preparation was psychological. I anticipated Karen's desperate counterattacks, character assassination, legal threats, attempts to cancel the meeting. Every disruption scenario received a prepared response that kept focus on documented facts rather than personal conflicts. The financial calculations were staggering: $47,000 in recoverable overcharges across the community, plus punitive damages for fraudulent insurance claims. Each family could potentially recover thousands through small claims courts once Karen's crimes were exposed. The smell of lake air drifting through my office window each evening reminded me why this mattered. Families should enjoy their homes without fear of arbitrary fines or vindictive harassment from power-drunk board presidents. 2 weeks of preparation had created unstoppable momentum toward Karen's public destruction. Some battles are won before the first shot is fired, and Karen was about to learn that lesson in front of everyone she'd ever bullied. Karen's desperation reached nuclear levels when she called an emergency HOA meeting, claiming I had created a hostile environment that threatened property values and community safety. The timing was perfect, exactly 1 week before my planned financial transparency presentation. She was trying to preemptively destroy me before I could destroy her. Her email blast to all homeowners read like a manifesto from someone whose clipboard had achieved sentience and declared war on democracy. Garrison Webb's litigious and confrontational behavior has created an atmosphere of fear that threatens our community's peaceful character and may result in insurance cancellations affecting all property values. Litigious. The woman who'd filed 17 fraudulent insurance claims was calling me litigious for requesting financial records that state law guaranteed as my homeowner right. It's like Ted Bundy calling someone else antisocial. But Karen's smear campaign escalated beyond community emails. She personally called elderly homeowners with warnings that my defiance could result in special assessments that might force them to sell homes they'd lived in for decades. The sound of Mrs. Patterson's voice shaking as she recounted Karen's phone call, "She said you're going to cost me my house, Garrison," made me want to drive to Karen's actual residence and have a very direct conversation about bullying war widows. Her husband joined the intimidation campaign by driving past supporters' homes multiple times daily, photographing properties from his truck window like some bargain basement private investigator. The crunch of gravel as his pickup circled the Morrisons' driveway became so frequent their dog started barking at the sound of any approaching vehicle. The smell of diesel exhaust lingered in their yard like a toxic calling card. Karen's surveillance expanded to following my family's daily routines. She'd park outside the grocery store, pharmacy, and restaurants where we shopped, taking notes about our activities like she was building a federal case against people buying milk and prescription medication. The woman had apparently confused HOA president with FBI surveillance specialist. The professional sabotage reached a new low when Karen contacted my wife's school principal, claiming I was an unstable veteran who might pose a safety risk to children. Dolores came home shaking after a meeting where she had to defend her husband's mental health to her employer because some HOA president had weaponized my military service against my family. She told them, "You have documented anger management issues and access to weapons," Dolores explained over dinner, that tasted like sawdust and fury. I had to show them your honorable discharge papers and explain that building docks doesn't make someone a terrorist. Karen's social media warfare created a private Facebook group called Concerned Lakeside Preserve Residents, where she posted selectively edited photos making my property look like a survivalist compound. My functional dock became unauthorized military-style fortification. My security cameras became surveillance equipment targeting neighbors. The woman had a talent for turning suburban normalcy into dystopian thriller material. The legal intimidation escalated when Karen filed a restraining order petition based on completely fabricated claims of threats and harassment. According to her sworn statement, I had aggressively approached her at various locations with threatening body language and made veiled references to military training. The truth: we'd accidentally encountered each other at the post office, grocery store, and bank, because we live in the same small town and use the same businesses like normal human beings. But in Karen's reality, existing while veteran apparently constituted criminal stalking. False police reports became Karen's new hobby. 3 separate noise complaints during my grandson's visits claimed loud military training exercises were disturbing the peace. The responding officers found an 8-year-old boy playing with water balloons and asked me privately if the woman filing reports might need mental health evaluation. But then Karen made a move so desperate it shocked even me. She attempted to convince the HOA secretary to delete all financial records older than 3 years to save storage space. When the secretary hesitated, Karen offered to handle the disposal personally to ensure proper document security. The secretary called me instead, her voice trembling with nervous energy. "Mr. Webb, this doesn't feel right. She's insisting we destroy records from before her husband started getting contracts. She keeps saying the old files are taking up unnecessary space." Document destruction during an active dispute isn't just suspicious, it's criminal obstruction that carries federal penalties. Karen was so panicked about my investigation that she was willing to commit additional felonies to cover up the original crimes. But here's the twist that made my jaw drop. The secretary revealed that Karen had been making these document destruction requests for weeks, ever since my original covenant research started. She keeps calling about cleaning up old paperwork and asking which files you've requested copies of. Karen hadn't just been covering her tracks. She'd been actively monitoring my investigation and attempting to destroy evidence in real time. The taste of pure vindication mixed with the metallic flavor of adrenaline as I realized Karen had been in full panic mode for weeks, systematically trying to eliminate evidence of her crimes. This woman was so desperate to hide her corruption that she'd escalated from simple fraud to federal obstruction of justice. Every attempt to silence me had created additional criminal liability that would guarantee her prosecution. The hunter had become the hunted, and Karen was about to discover that cornered criminals make fatal mistakes. Karen's final week before the HOA meeting devolved into behavior so unhinged that even her most devoted clipboard disciples started questioning her sanity. She contacted Channel 7 News claiming a dangerous veteran was threatening a peaceful suburban community, positioning herself as the brave whistleblower exposing my alleged reign of terror. The interview footage was pure gold. Karen, sitting in her BMW wearing full makeup and a Lakeside Preserve board president sash she'd apparently custom-ordered, explained to bewildered reporter Maria Santos how my dock constituted a clear and present danger to community safety. "This man refuses to follow basic community standards," Karen declared with the solemnity of someone announcing nuclear war. "His military background makes him particularly resistant to civilian authority structures." The reporter's confused expression was priceless. "Ma'am, are you saying fishing docks are militaristic?" But Karen wasn't finished destroying her credibility. She reached out to County Commissioner Paul Hayes, who owed her favors from past real estate deals, requesting emergency code enforcement harassment targeting my property. The smell of corruption mixed with desperation as she leveraged political connections to weaponize government agencies against a private citizen. 3 different county inspectors showed up within 48 hours, each looking embarrassed to be investigating potential violations on a property that had already passed multiple inspections. The sound of measuring tapes and clipboards became my daily soundtrack as Karen's political allies conducted fishing expeditions for any possible violation. The financial warfare escalated when Karen filed liens against my property for unpaid HOA fines, totaling $3,700. Fines I'd never acknowledged because they violated state law. She was attempting to force foreclosure proceedings based on fabricated debts, essentially trying to steal my house through fraudulent paperwork. Her community petition drive reached cartoonish levels of manipulation. Karen orchestrated a campaign demanding my forced buyout at current market value minus community disruption costs to restore neighborhood harmony. The woman was literally trying to get neighbors to vote me out of my own property like some dystopian homeowner exile program. But Karen's husband took the sabotage into criminal territory when he accidentally damaged my gate mechanism during another compliance measurement visit. The sound of metal grinding against metal as my perfectly functioning gate suddenly required expensive repairs was too convenient to be coincidental. "Looks like normal wear and tear," he shrugged after his socket wrench had mysteriously stripped the locking mechanism. "These older gates need regular maintenance." The legal system abuse reached peak absurdity when Karen filed multiple frivolous court motions designed to exhaust my legal budget through sheer volume. Motion to compel discovery, motion to dismiss counterclaims, motion for emergency injunction, motion for sanctions. The taste of legal fees mixed with mounting fury as my attorney's bills climbed toward 5 figures for defending against baseless harassment. Karen's character assassination campaign expanded to attacking my military service with lies so outrageous they bordered on libel. She spread rumors that I'd been discharged for mental health issues and violent incidents, easily disproven claims that nonetheless poisoned community perception among people who didn't know me personally. The employment targeting became personal when Karen contacted potential employers as Dolores applied for library director positions in neighboring counties. "I feel obligated to warn you about the Webb family's litigious tendencies and community disruption patterns," she told hiring committees, sabotaging my wife's career opportunities because she couldn't destroy mine directly. Karen's insurance fraud escalated to breathtaking audacity when she submitted a false claim alleging my gate had damaged community property during a supposed malfunction, requesting $15,000 for emergency repairs to a sidewalk that showed 0 damage. But here's where Karen's desperation created the most beautiful irony. Her escalating behavior was generating perfect evidence for my upcoming presentation. Every illegal action, every false claim, every harassment incident was documented on security cameras, recorded phone calls, and sworn witness statements. The witness intimidation reached its peak when Karen privately threatened neighbors who'd expressed support for my position. "Your property will be next for violations if you don't stay neutral," she warned families who'd experienced their own Karen abuse. The smell of fear permeated community interactions as people realized speaking up against Karen could make them targets. But then came Karen's most desperate gambit. She offered to withdraw all legal actions if I signed a non-disclosure agreement and moved within 60 days. The proposed settlement included a clause preventing me from discussing HOA matters with media, residents, or government agencies. She was literally offering to stop committing crimes against me if I agreed to stay silent about the crimes she'd already committed against everyone else. It's like a serial killer offering to stop murdering people if the witnesses promise not to call police about the previous murders. The NDA proposal revealed Karen's true panic level. She knew my investigation had uncovered evidence that could destroy her, and she was willing to offer anything to prevent public exposure. But here's the final twist that sealed Karen's fate. My trail camera captured her husband vandalizing my security cameras at 2 a.m., spray painting "Move" on my mailbox in letters large enough to be seen from space. The infrared footage showed both their faces clearly as they committed federal crimes on my property while thinking they were eliminating evidence. Karen's escalating desperation had led her to commit crimes that would guarantee criminal prosecution, regardless of how the HOA meeting went. Every attempt to silence me had created additional evidence that made her destruction inevitable. The final battle was 48 hours away, and Karen had already lost. Meeting night arrived with the electricity of a summer thunderstorm. The community center parking lot was packed with more cars than I'd seen since the 4th of July festival. 47 families, local reporter Maria Santos with her camera crew, and, thanks to Karen's own disturbance call, Sheriff's Deputy Marcus Johnson responding to her preemptive complaint about potential community disruption. The smell of nervous energy mixed with the community center's perpetual coffee and floor wax aroma as residents filed in. Some faces showed curiosity, others anxiety, and a few displayed the grim determination of people who'd been financially abused for too long. Karen arrived fashionably late in full battle regalia, power suit, clipboard fortress, and 3 allied board members flanking her like discount Secret Service agents. The sound of her heels clicking across the linoleum announced her entrance with the authority of someone who still believed she controlled the narrative. "Thank you all for attending this critical community meeting," Karen began, positioning herself at the podium like a general addressing troops. "Tonight, we address the hostile environment created by certain residents who refuse to respect community standards and threaten our property values through litigious behavior." She launched into a presentation that would have impressed Joseph Goebbels with its creative relationship to truth. According to Karen's version of reality, my requests for financial transparency had destabilized community harmony. My legal challenges were frivolous harassment, and my security cameras constituted surveillance intimidation of neighbors. The visual aids were spectacular fiction. Photos of my property edited to look ominous, charts showing legal costs that blamed me for expenses generated by Karen's own harassment campaign, and testimonials from concerned residents who happened to be her 3 remaining allies. Mr. Webb's military background has created an aggressive atmosphere incompatible with peaceful family living, Karen declared with the solemnity of someone diagnosing cancer. "For the safety and stability of our community, the board recommends immediate action to address this ongoing disruption." That's when I requested the floor for my financial transparency report as a legally entitled homeowner. The taste of anticipation mixed with righteous fury as I approached the podium with my evidence folders. "Thank you, Mrs. Whitfield, for that creative presentation," I began, savoring the brief flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. "Now let me show everyone the real numbers behind community finances over the past 6 years." The large screen display lit up with Karen's husband's invoices compared to market rate pricing. $300,000 in overcharges visible to the entire room in fonts large enough for elderly residents to read without glasses. Gasps rippled through the audience as families recognized their own projects listed at inflated prices. The Henderson's driveway ceiling, market rate $1,200, actual charge $4,000. The Patterson garden replanting, market rate $800, actual charge $3,000. Karen's face began shifting through shades of red that don't exist in nature. "Those numbers are taken out of context. Let me provide context," I continued, advancing to the residency fraud evidence. "According to property tax records, Mrs. Whitfield doesn't actually live in our community. She claims homestead exemption on a different address while billing our HOA for housing expenses as a board member." The time-lapse photos played on screen, Karen's BMW leaving every Sunday night, returning Friday mornings, 47 consecutive weeks. Deputy Johnson leaned forward in his chair, suddenly very interested in what constituted criminal tax fraud. "But wait, there's more," I announced with the enthusiasm of a game show host revealing the grand prize. The insurance fraud evidence hit the screen. 17 false claims totaling $87,000, 3 of them filed during weeks with 0 weather events. Mrs. Patterson stood up, tears streaming down her face. "She made me destroy Harold's memorial garden 3 days after his funeral, called it an unauthorized decoration, and threatened daily fines if I didn't comply." The room erupted in angry murmurs as other families shared their Karen horror stories. The Morrison family's forced driveway replacement, Tom Bradley's bird feeder violations, the Henderson family's pool depth corrections that cost them $30,000 before they moved away in defeat. Karen attempted damage control with increasingly desperate interruptions. This is all taken out of context. These people are ungrateful for the improvements I've brought to our community. That's when I played the recorded phone call where Karen admitted to insurance fraud and asked me to become an accomplice. Her own voice filled the room. "If you support the claim, we could both benefit financially from the storm damage assessment." The silence that followed was deafening. 47 families staring at their HOA president as her recorded confession played through speakers that amplified every word of admitted criminal conspiracy. Deputy Johnson stood up, hand moving toward his handcuffs. "Ma'am, I think we need to discuss this recording and several other matters outside." Karen's final meltdown was spectacular. "You're all ungrateful. I've dedicated 6 years to improving this community. You people don't deserve the leadership I provided." She lunged toward my evidence table, attempting to grab financial documents before Deputy Johnson restrained her. The sound of papers scattering and Karen screaming about conspiracies while being escorted from the building provided the perfect soundtrack for her empire's collapse. Maria Santos captured every moment on camera for the evening news broadcast that would make Karen's crimes regional headlines. The emergency board vote was unanimous. Karen removed from all positions, immediate forensic audit authorized, criminal referrals approved. Justice tastes like victory mixed with the satisfaction of community liberation. The aftermath of Karen's public destruction unfolded like watching a controlled demolition in slow motion. Within 2 weeks, she'd moved out of the community entirely, avoiding felony prosecution only by agreeing to pay full restitution plus community service. Though her real estate license was permanently revoked, and her husband's construction company faced civil penalties that effectively ended their local operations. The financial recovery exceeded everyone's expectations. The insurance company covered $180,000 in fraudulent claims, while our civil lawsuit against Karen's husband recovered an additional $120,000 in overcharges. Suddenly, families who'd been financially terrorized for years were receiving checks that covered their stolen money plus punitive damages. The new HOA board implemented transparency measures that would make government auditors proud: mandatory competitive bidding for all contracts, quarterly financial reports to homeowners, term limits for board positions, and electronic voting systems that prevented the kind of shadow meetings Karen had used to manipulate community decisions. My gate access and dock were officially recognized as protected community heritage assets in the updated covenant language, ensuring no future board president could weaponize property rights against homeowners. The irony was delicious. Karen's attack on my property had resulted in stronger legal protections for everyone. Mrs. Patterson rebuilt Harold's Memorial Garden with community volunteer help, creating the most beautiful tribute space on the lake. The smell of roses and lavender now marks the spot where Karen once demanded destruction, transformed into a symbol of healing and remembrance. The garden's dedication ceremony drew families from neighboring communities who'd heard about our victory over HOA tyranny. The legal precedent our case established became a model for homeowner rights advocacy throughout Georgia. Property attorneys now reference Webb v. Lakeside Preserve when fighting HOA corruption, and my documentation methods have been incorporated into state guidelines for investigating financial fraud in community associations. Karen's professional consequences extended beyond our community. The Georgia Real Estate Commission used her case to strengthen licensing requirements and fiduciary oversight, while insurance companies implemented new fraud detection systems specifically designed to identify the kind of systematic abuse Karen had perpetrated. But the most satisfying outcome was the community scholarship fund we established using recovered fraud money. The Lakeside Preserve Community Scholarship provides annual funding for local students studying engineering, law, or public service, turning Karen's stolen money into opportunities for young people to build careers protecting others from similar abuse. Property values actually increased after Karen's removal, as real estate agents began promoting our community as corruption-free governance with transparent financial management. The marketing practically writes itself. Live where accountability matters and HOA boards serve homeowners, not themselves. My educational outreach evolved into a website documenting HOA accountability tactics that helps homeowners nationwide fight similar corruption. The response has been overwhelming. Families from Alaska to Florida sharing their own Karen horror stories and using our evidence-gathering methods to expose financial abuse in their communities. Dolores not only got the library director position in the next county, but was actively recruited because her experience dealing with HOA harassment demonstrated grace under pressure and commitment to community service. Karen's attempt to destroy my wife's career actually enhanced her professional reputation. The most important lesson came from my grandson Trey, who learned about integrity, legal systems, and documentation importance through watching his grandfather fight corruption with facts rather than violence. "Grandpa, you used papers to beat the mean lady," he observed with 8-year-old clarity that cut straight to the heart of the matter. Our annual HOA Transparency Day Festival has become a regional celebration of accountable governance, featuring barbecue at my famous dock, educational workshops about homeowner rights, and presentations by attorneys specializing in community association law. The taste of perfectly grilled burgers mixed with the satisfaction of community healing makes for the best kind of victory meal. The conservation project we funded with remaining recovered money created a nature preserve around the lake that protects water quality for future generations, ensuring families can enjoy the same peaceful lake access that started this whole battle. Regional impact extended to Georgia HOA reform legislation requiring mandatory financial audits, residency verification for board members, and a homeowner bill of rights that prevents the kind of systematic abuse Karen had perfected. As I sit on my dock at sunset, grandson fishing beside me, I know we preserved this place for future generations, who'll never know how close they came to losing their freedom to clipboard tyrants and financial predators. The crunch of gravel under visitors' feet as families walk to Mrs. Patterson's memorial garden reminds me that some battles are worth fighting not just for yourself, but for everyone who can't fight back.